This videotape deposition of Dana Martin. It's beginning recording number 1. Today's date is Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. We're now on the record at 11:48 a.m.
And just so that we're clear, the last page of the Hinton appraisal, as it's before us as an attachment to your declaration, Exhibit 36 is what? The last page number.
Oh, the last page number
Of the Hinton appraisal, yes, ma'am.
is 22.
22.
21.
21.
21.
Thank you. Okay. Now, the Hinton appraisal, if I understand correctly, it was emailed to Mr. Maben, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that email exchange is in this big book here. I think we will find it at tab 65. Try that. Is that the email exchange that by which Hinton sent the appraisal?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And it looks like he sent it to Mr. Maben, and then Mr. Maben circulated it to the members of the board and Mr. Burris. That Water Management Yahoo is Mr. Burris, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And he did that on September 21st at 6:58 a.m. is what it looks like. Is that right?
Yes.
And then it looks like he did it again. If you flip back to the last, next to the last page of that exhibit, do you see that email from Mr. Maben a little bit later on the 21st?
Yes.
At 8:40 a.m.?
Yes.
He sends it around again. Well, actually, he sends it to Mulligan and copies the rest of you. And he says, let's all look this over and consider it. I would like to discuss this at the meeting in exec session and its impact on decisions about financials. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And then, if you look back a page, because that's how emails are, do you see the email from Mr. Mulligan to Mr. Maben
Yes.
that follows his circulating this appraisal?
Yes.
And what Mr. Mulligan says, September 21st, 2015 at 9:28 a.m. is, I do not agree with this valuation. Do you see that?
Yes.
He says, the appraisal states the highest and best use of the property is as is, when the highest and best use is airport. Do you see that?
Yes.
He was right about that, wasn't he?
Yes.
It says, it also states this could be a residential development. The comps are not representative of this piece. He was right about that, wasn't he? He was right about that. The comps were not representative of this particular tract, were they?
Objection form.
I'm not an appraiser, so I can't say
How
that.
many years do you have in real estate business?
Around 40.
Buying and selling real estate for 40 years, right? In this area right here, right?
No, ma'am.
Not in this area?
No.
How many
I
years
moved
in?
here in 91.
Okay, so check my math, but that's 9, and that's like, what, over 20?
Over 20.
Over 20 years in the real estate business, buying and selling real estate in Spicewood, Texas area, right?
Correct?
In Windermere, Oaks, in the airport, in, what's that, Harbor Ridge? Is that one of those little subdivisions? What else? Tennis
Harbor.
Village, right? Selling in there. Are there other developments out there that you've been active in, buying and selling?
And by saying buying and selling.
Involved in a transaction as a broker, as a party.
Okay. Yes, I've been in the area for over 20 years.
How many transactions would you say that you've had some part in as a broker, as a party?
I have no idea.
Too many
A
to
lot.
count, right?
Sure, sure.
Okay, so don't be modest now. You're pretty knowledgeable about the real estate in the Spicewood airport area and its value, aren't you?
Yes.
Because you've been involved in a whole bunch of transactions involving that real estate, correct?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
And so when Mr. Mulligan was critical, that the tracts that were being used as comparables weren't really comparable. And he even says why in here. Do you see that?
Yes.
He was correct, wasn't he?
Well, I disagree with what he says in his email, but
Okay.
we hadn't discussed it. So, you know,
So you think
He
he
goes
was
up-
not correct?
I think he is incorrect.
Okay. And when he says that the road, ownership of the road is not mentioned in the report, he is correct, isn't he?
I don't see the relevance of it, the ownership of the road.
Well, we're going to get to that, believe me. But in the meantime, he is correct that the Hinton report does not mention the road, correct?
By the road, you mean the road coming into the airport? Which road are you referring to?
What is the road that the water supply company owns on September 21, 2015?
There's two roads that it owns.
Okay, tell me what they are.
So there's a 20-foot road that wraps around and past Sky King and goes to the boat parking area.
Okay, and do you think that that is a road into the community? Would that be a road into the community?
That is a road into the 11 acres. That is,
Okay.
Then there is Piper Lane Road, which is the main road going into the airport.
Piper Road is definitely a road into the community, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
It is the primary taxiway for those users, is it not?
Yes, ma'am.
And it was owned by the water supply company, correct?
Yes.
And it was not included in the Hinton appraisal. It was not even referred to in the Hinton appraisal, was it?
I really don't recall.
We'll look and see.
The rest of that's in there. It doesn't refer to the access road.
It doesn't refer to Piper Lane at all, does it?
I don't see on first look that it does.
So from your looking at that appraisal, you can determine that when Mr. Mulligan said that Mr. Hinton has not taken into account the ownership of the road into the community, he was correct.
Well, I believe the road frontage is part of the property, and
You know I'm not talking about road frontage, don't you?
the taxiway and road frontage.
I'm talking about the land on which Piper Lane is located. That's what I'm talking about.
And that's what I call road frontage on the existing land.
That's what you call frontage?
That's road
I can call it
frontage.
frontage if that's what you like.
Okay.
But I'm talking about the taxiway. So we're
Taxiway and
clear.
road frontage. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
And you don't see that mentioned in the Hinton report, so when Mr. Mulligan says that Hinton hasn't dealt with the taxiway and road frontage, he's correct.
I'm sorry, I just think it's a given that it's got road frontage. I mean, I don't see the distinction there, but that's, yeah, because it's an easement.
He is correct. That the Hinton appraisal does not include
Since I'm
the
not,
road into the community.
since I'm not the appraiser, I don't know why he assumed it like that, but I consider it, because it's part of the easement that everybody's using, no matter who owns it, any property adjoining it has use of it.
Well, we'll get to that in just a minute.
Okay.
And we'll see if that's so. But in the meantime, can you agree with me that whether you know why Hinton did it that way or you don't, who knows, it is correct that Hinton did not appraise Piper Lane.
He,
Objection form.
not being an appraiser, I just assume that it's an assumption the property already has that frontage. And I don't know why it's not in his appraisal. I think that would have been a given, I guess.
You know that Piper Lane occupies a certain amount of land on the ground, correct?
Correct?
What is the size of the easement for Piper Lane?
I think it's, I'd have to look back on the original easement that was given back in 97 or something
Does
to see the size of the easement.
like 0.7 acres ring a bell?
Could be,
About something about like that?
yeah.
So Piper Lane sits on about 0.7 acres of land, correct?
Piper Lane plus this, some extra frontage of the easement.
For the wings, because we got to have got to get by with the wings, right? Okay. And so that easement area occupies about 7/10 of an acre, correct?
That's correct.
That 7/10 of an acre is not appraised by Hinton in that appraisal, is it?
No, I don't see it in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Mulligan also says that the Hinton appraisal states there is not proposed change in usage. This is incorrect. Do you see that?
Yes.
There was a proposed change in usage, wasn't there?
I don't know what he's referring to in there.
Well, it was sitting there vacant, right?
Correct?
There was going to be a change of usage, correct?
The highest and best use is for hangars.
Okay.
We all
and-
agree to that.
And that's right. All the board agreed the highest and best use was hangar lots, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And that's what all of the board members expected would be the use, correct?
Correct?
Okay. And so when Mulligan is critical that Hinton assumes that it's going to remain vacant, he is correct, isn't he?
That's his opinion, yes.
He's correct. Hinton does assume that it's going to remain vacant, doesn't he?
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, did you see this email at her about the time that it
Yeah.
was sent?
Yeah,
And did you try to go back and figure out, gee, does Mulligan have something here, or is he just whistling Dixie?
no, he goes on to say, I misspoke, we all need to sit down and talk, and that's
If
that's
you
what I
find
remember.
misspoke in this email chain, you tell me.
He says, well, I didn't mean to send this yet, it's just my stream of conscious notes after my first read of the appraisal.
Yeah, I don't see misspoke in there.
Check form.
But if you do, we'll highlight it with the yellow highlighter.
Check form.
My position may change after I read this a second time.
Now, you were here when I asked Mr. Maben about this, weren't you?
Yes,
And you recall that what Mr. Maben said is he never did change Mulligan's mind. Don't you?
Check form. Check form.
I don't remember that.
You don't?
I really don't.
Remember he said he didn't have the bandwidth? I'll never forget that. He didn't have the bandwidth for it?
Check form.
No, I don't remember that.
What do you think he said?
Check form. Check form.
I don't know. I'd have to read the transcript again.
You don't have-
And I may have been coughing during that.
I don't think you do that.
Oh, I had the flu when I came in.
You don't remember what he said.
I don't remember exactly what he said.
If what he said was, no, he did not change Mulligan's view, do you believe that is inaccurate?
Object form.
I don't know what his opinion was on that then.
Do you recall one way or another whether Mabin, see, I keep wanting to say Mebane because that's how I heard it the first time, I'm sorry, whether Mabin ever persuaded Mulligan from the positions that he expressed in his email of September 21, 2015 at 9:28 a.m.?
No, I don't recall what his position was after any discussion he had with Mabin on it.
Did you discuss it with Mulligan?
No, I did not.
Okay, so do you know one way or the other whether Mulligan ever, what did you say, after looking at it a second time, thought differently?
I don't know.
Okay, so did you ever have any discussion with Mulligan about the Hinton appraisal?
No, he never contacted me on it.
And you never contacted him?
No.
Did you have any discussion with Ernest
No.
about the Hinton appraisal?
No.
How about Madden?
No.
None at all, ever?
None at all, ever.
Okay, so when Mr. Mabin said, let's all look this over, I would like to discuss this at the meeting in exec session, did that just not ever happen?
Well, I'm sure we discussed it in executive session, but not individually. We were all there in executive session.
Okay, so let me not be so limiting.
Okay.
When you spoke with any of the other directors, wherever it might have been, about the Hinton appraisal, I want to get to the bottom of that. I want to know what was discussed about the Hinton appraisal.
You know, I don't recall in executive session what we discussed on it. You know, I think that, you know, my best recollection is that Bob said he wanted to do his own research on it and that he would get back with the board. And that's where everything got left.
Did Mr. Mabin go out and retain a separate appraiser on behalf of the water supply company to develop a valuation?
Not to my knowledge.
Did he ever go out and retain an engineer or other professional to develop opinions about the airport property on behalf of the water supply company?
Other professional, I believe I would consider that he spoke with other real estate people and other developers, and that's what he told us.
Okay, here's what the distinction that I'm trying to make,
Okay.
and maybe it's not one worth making. I want to know if he ever went out and engaged a professional in his capacity as president of the water supply company and charged them with the task of making some determination or another concerning the airport property.
It's my understanding he went out and engaged and spoke to other real estate professionals and other developers about the property.
Do you know any more about that than what he told us himself in his deposition?
No.
Because
No.
you didn't do that, he did
I didn't
that.
do that, he did.
Everything that you know about that, something he told you?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know whether he ever engaged an engineer or a land planner to look at this property on behalf of the water supply company?
I'm not aware of that, that he did that.
Okay. Were you doing land planning at that time also?
No, I don't believe I was.
Okay, but you're doing it now.
Well,
What you told
I
me
have
earlier.
an idea of what I want to do.
You told me land planning and consulting you were doing in your capacity as a member of Friendship. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And have you learned,
Sorry.
did you have some education and all in between September of 2015 and now that allows you to do that?
You mean go to college education?
Any
Or
kind. Through the track, anything?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, so you knew as much then as you know now about land planning, is that right?
Well, I think because I designed what was built already at the airport there, and you know, in my mind, just, you know, knowing a person comes up, for me, you come up with different ways to develop a property.
Would it be fair to say that based upon your knowledge of your fellow directors and your experience with them, you certainly knew a lot more than any of your fellow directors did about developing hangar lots
Check form.
in September of 2015?
Check form.
Yes.
Had any of your fellow, to your knowledge, had any of your fellow directors ever developed even one hangar lot?
To my knowledge, they haven't.
To your knowledge, has any of your fellow directors developed an air park subdivision like Windermere Air Park 1 and 2?
Not to my knowledge.
To your knowledge, had any of your fellow directors in September or any time in the fall of 2015, had they ever tried to lay out hangar lots on property, like land planning, in other words?
Check form.
And what were the dates that you were saying?
The fall of 2015.
In fall of 2015, as far as I know, nobody has, unless Bob did that with this developer he was talking to, but I'm not aware of it.
Since you were worried about the time frame, have they done it since?
No, not at all.
Okay. Okay. All right. Can you answer this question for me? When you talked to Hinton and told him to go forth and appraise, did you tell him to appraise it as of September 2014?
No.
Why did he do that?
It's 2015.
Okay, I'm just seeing what I read here. Look with me on page, and by pages again, I'm referring to little handwritten ones for
Right.
convenience. 12.
I think he made a typo.
Well, look at page 12. That has his signature on it, right?
Yes?
And it says effective date of appraisal, 9/1/2014, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the date that he signed everything is 9/18/2015.
Yes,
I have no idea.
You do
what-
understand that the effective date of the appraisal can and often is different from the date that it's signed, right?
Check form.
I just considered that a typo that he printed in the 14.
Did you go back to him and say, gosh, Jim?
No, Bob was talking with him. Bob had a copy of this. I stayed completely out of that.
Why would you do that?
Because Bob is the one who wanted to go to him and talk with him and also go to other developers. And from what Bob was saying, he doesn't put much faith in any appraisals.
Why on earth would you stay completely out of conversations with the appraiser with your knowledge of real estate in the area? Why would you stay completely out of that?
Check form.
Check form.
Well, I didn't see the 2014. I think my eyes always saw 2015 also.
And he does it again. If it's a typo, he does it on page 3. Do you see on page 3? Again, that's his signature, right? You know his signature?
Well, just from this, I know it.
Okay. Do you think he didn't sign this report?
I have no reason to believe that.
Okay. So, best we know, that's his signature right there on page 3. And you see it says we estimate the market value of the subject property as of 9/1/2014 to be $185,000. You think it's a typo in two places?
I think it's a typo. I think somebody needs to call him, and that'd be a question for him.
Okay. Best you know, whoever was using this appraisal, if anybody was assuming that it was as of September 2015, not September 2014, right?
Correct.
And you just didn't notice that?
That's correct.
Okay. That's not something you told him to do, in other words.
No, ma'am.
In his email to the board of September 21, 2015 at 8:40 a.m., Mr. Mabin also says he wants to talk in exec session about its impact on decisions about financials. Goodness gracious, we can shut that off. What discussion was had in an exec session or otherwise about the impact of this appraisal on decisions about financials?
I truthfully don't recall back then what we discussed in the meeting.
Well, is it not true that the board restructured the loan? That was the decision it made on financials?
Yes.
And did the board restructure the loan based in part on this Hinton appraisal of effective date September 2014?
No, I think it came later than that. I really do. Yeah. The discussion with the banker and all that.
Came after September of 2015?
You know, I really can't put a date to it.
Because I asked you what precipitated the Hinton appraisal, and you know what you told me? Is we went to the bank, and the banker says we can give you a fixed rate if you pay down the loan. Is that wrong?
That may be wrong. I mean, the time frame on everything is just kind of boggled when I go back. So,
How could we refresh your memory on those things?
Well, there is. I think there's an email that in the discovery stuff that has an email from the banker.
Okay, well, I overlooked that, but when we take another break,
whatever the date of that is, that's when we were talking to him.
I will go back and look through the discovery stuff and see if I can find that.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, it's so hard 4 years later to try and pinpoint dates that anything.
That's why I bring these big books, is to help us be as accurate as we can.
Right.
And I don't want you making up dates that you don't really remember, but we need to do the best we can to get the chronology put together.
Yes.
So,
That's why I'm backing up and trying to make sure that we don't have the wrong dates in mind.
So now, what is your best recollection of what precipitated the Hinton appraisal? Or any appraisal? What precipitated the board saying, gee, we'd like to get an appraisal? Would you go get us some prices?
And I'm hate to speculate, but I know that the previous board had always discussed putting the property on the market after the sewer plant got moved. And I think it's just the plan of action that Pat Mulligan and the previous board had constantly had in their mind.
I think that you're right about that. Can you take a look with me at tab 41 of that big book? And if we're on the same page, it ought to be a set of the minutes for the Water Supply Company of April 23rd, 2011.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
That is correct.
And so, a couple of questions about that. If you drop down to the bottom, you see Spicewood Pilots Association proposal.
Yes.
And it says SPA has retained Gary Young to represent their interest. Was that the Spicewood Pilots Association that you're associated with?
Yes.
And is the Gary Young the same one who wrote the email that we saw as Exhibit 37?
Yes.
Okay. And he says that the Pilots Association has an interest in buying 7 acres near the wastewater treatment plant from the WOWSC. Do you see that?
Yes.
What 7 acres was that?
Well, the only 7 acres that I know of is the one that wraps around the sewer plant land of 4 acres.
And what did the Pilots Association want with that 7 acres?
I don't recall us ever asking to buy that. I know that we were talking about the 5.78 acres between Exeter and the runway.
So is this just inaccurate that Mr. Young he was not retained by the Pilots Association, and he did not write a letter on behalf of the SPA expressing an interest in purchasing 7 acres? Is that just wrong?
I think we'd need to go back and ask Mr. Gary Young about that. I don't recall, and that's in 2011. I don't recall I personally don't recall the Pilots Association asking him to ask that, but that's my recollection only.
Did the Pilots Association ever have any interest in the 7 acres that wraps around the old lagoon area?
Not that I know of.
Okay. And then if you turn the page, you're going to see that there was extensive discussion about selling the 7 acres to offset the cost of the new plant. And discussion continued, and I'm reading right after it says motion carried. Are you with me?
Yes.
Discussion continued, and the board agreed that we had a fiscal responsibility to our shareholders to A, determine the fair market value of the property, and B, obtain the best possible price by exposing the property to more than one buyer. Do you see that?
Yes.
And was that Mulligan who said that?
I don't know. I wasn't at that meeting.
Was that the view that Mulligan had throughout the time that you served with him on the board?
Object form.
Let me ask
I
it
think that's
differently. Was that the view that Mulligan expressed during the time that you served with him on the board?
Absolutely.
Okay. And just so we're clear, that the view was that the water supply company needed to obtain the best possible price for this land.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
And you agreed with that in your capacity as a director, did you not?
Yes.
Was there any director who did not agree with that?
No?
Was there ever a time when the water supply company put any of the old wastewater treatment plant property on the market that you know of?
I don't think that we would call the 0.7 acres or something like that, the lot that was agreed to sell early in 2015. That was part of that land.
Okay, I'm confused by what you just said, so can
Okay.
you try it one more time?
Okay, so there's a yes.
It was marketed, put on the market. What was put on the market?
Piece of property that fronts on Piper Lane that the water company rerouted.
Tract G.
That's it.
Yes,
That's
Tract
correct.
G. Tell me about Tract G. You were involved with the sale of Tract G, were you not?
Yes.
What was your involvement?
I had a buyer that bought it.
How did you know that Tract G might be available?
Several members of the water board had told me, and I think we may have had to do an easement. They had to reroute a sewer line over there so they could handle a hangar.
Excuse me. You found it out from the board, somebody on the board?
They were working to reroute the sewer line, and I was told they were rerouting it to put the property on the market.
Okay, but it never got on the market, right?
I never saw a sign go up on it. I was told by Bill Ernest that he was ordering a sign for it. And I said, how much are you all asking for the property?
So did you go to Ernst or did he come to you?
I went to Bill Ernest.
Ernest. So you went to him, he didn't come to you?
That is correct.
And you went to him when?
I would say whenever the property was put under contract, and I don't know the exact date, I had talked to him probably the week before.
Because you saw construction on the property?
Well, I think the construction had already happened and they'd cleaned it up. But yes, they were rerouting the line, and I was told that they're going to put the property on the market for $100,000.
Okay, and that was from Bill Ernest?
Yes. He told me, I was not on the board, he told me he was in charge of that.
So far as you know, there was never any listing agreement or sales agreement with a real estate professional to put the property on the market, is that right?
That's correct.
Did Mr. Ernest tell you that they were going to list it? Or
No, he told me they were just going to put a sign on it.
They were just going to put a sign on it, okay. And they were asking $100,000 for the property in its current condition.
Yes.
So you had someone who wanted to buy that property, is that right?
Well, I had someone in mind that I would call to buy the property.
Who was that?
Mr. Charlie Whidden.
And that name Whidden is associated with you quite a bit. Is that somebody that you've done a lot of business with?
Yes.
Okay. And so I take it that a contract was put in with the water board on that property?
Yes.
What was the offer price?
$95,000.
And what did it sell for?
$95,000.
Let me go ahead and mark this so we... It's going to be Exhibit 40, and I want to see if that's the deed that conveyed the Tract G property to, it was a Whidden Trust, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
Is that deed?
Yes.
Did you get a commission in connection with that sale?
Yes.
How much was your commission?
3%.
Of $95,000?
Yes.
Now, are you aware that there's no mention in any meeting minute about selling that property?
I am now, yes.
Were you at the time?
No.
Did you go to the, did you go to any meeting where action was posted on that item to present your proposal, or did you just present it privately?
I gave the contract to Bill, and he came back with it signed.
You said you had been on the water board before. You knew that they needed to have action at an open meeting in order to sell that property, didn't you?
Check form.
Check form.
No, I didn't.
So that was just not something that you worried about at that point. And that was it May of 2015?
We closed May of 2015.
Do you recall that being a lengthy transaction?
No? Well, it had to be replatted.
Why did the water supply company need to replat that property?
Because the property was originally designed to carry, had a 15-foot easement, and to carry effluent water, treated water across the road. It was never originally platted as a hangar lot.
It was never originally platted at all, was it?
No, no.
It wasn't replatted, it was platted in the first instance,
Judgment form.
It's,
in 2015.
it was platted off an existing plat. So it's a subdivision of an existing property.
You're telling me that you believe that the property that became Tract G had been previously platted?
No, when it's off of an existing piece of property, it's a replat. It's a plat. It's a subdivision
that's right.
of an existing property.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's not a replat, it's a plat.
Right.
This has never been, this particular piece of property, either itself or as part of a larger tract, had never been platted, correct?
That's correct. It had not been platted off before.
And and it didn't need to be platted in order to be sold, correct?
It did need to be platted to be sold as a small lot.
Well, you yourself had sold numerous properties as small lots that were not platted. Isn't that true?
No, that's not true.
You don't recall ever having done that?
In order for it to become a small lot, it had to have been platted into a small lot.
Do you not agree that you yourself have sold unplatted acreage tracts without platting them first?
Tracts that are sold in meets and bounds in one big piece would be a meets and bounds transaction. Tracts that are split off are usually a platted tract that is split off and sold.
Tracts A, B, C, D, and E were part of a 2-point-something acre tract, and they were never platted, correct?
They were sold off from an existing, they were platted off an existing survey.
Are you claiming here under oath today that we're going to find a subdivision plat that covers tracts A, B, C, D, or E?
No, but
Because
it was
there's not one.
subdivided into smaller lots, so I guess it may be schematics, but it's still a subdividing of an existing property.
They were sold, they were subdivided from an existing tract, and they were sold as small lots, and they were never platted, correct?
Object form. Object form.
In order for it to be a small lot, it had to been surveyed off of a larger lot.
You know
So-
what platted means, don't you?
Objection 4.
Object form.
So, I mean, when we're platting off of an existing large tract,
So it's around 12:30, and I was thinking this is a good time to take a lunch break.
I'd like to finish this one topic, and then we can do whatever we want to do. One more.
About 10 minutes?
Yeah, yep. Okay, Exhibit 42 is the plat for Tract G, right?
yes,
So when we talk about platting, that's what we're talking about, right?
yes,
And you know that because you're the one who did it, aren't you?
yes, yes.
These are the minutes. 41 is the minutes from the Commissioner's Court hearing where you went over there on behalf of the water supply company and platted that property, right?
Right, that's
So when
platted
I-
off.
When I
Correct.
talk about platting, you know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you?
Object form.
Objection 4.
Object form.
This is considered a plat.
Yes,
Tract
that's
G.
platting.
That is correct.
And you know that platting is going over to the Burnett County Commissioner's Court and getting a plat, don't you?
Yes.
Subdividing means cutting it up into little pieces, right?
They're, in my way of thinking, they're synonymous, so that's, you're treating them as two different things.
I want to know what benefit the water supply company got from spending its money to have you go and get a plat for Ms. Witten before the property was closed. That's what I want to know.
Object form. Object form.
How was that in the interest of the water supply company? What did it get out of that?
Object form.
Without platting it, they couldn't have sold it as a small lot.
How did you sell tracts A, B, C, D, and E without platting them?
Under the current regulations at Burnett County, we were following what in the requirements of the county commissioner's court. And when we did this plat, that's what was required for it to be platted off of the existing large tract of land.
You told me Ms. Witten agreed to pay $95,000 as it sat, correct?
You still have to get it platted off of the mother tract.
Okay.
Survey.
Tell me how we would,
plan.
go ahead. No, I
I'm
said
sorry.
I was going to let you finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Nope, you finish. I don't want to cut you off.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I just consider the plat is a survey.
Okay.
And so for it to not be attached to the mother tract of land, it needed to be surveyed out and platted at the courthouse.
Platting is what you do at the courthouse.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. So, tell me this. If we wanted to figure out how much per acre that property sold for, how do we do it?
You would take the length and the width and divide it by 43,560 square feet to get the size, and this one is awfully small to read. It says it's 7,074 something square feet.
Does the deed say? Because I think it does, and it's easier to read.
Yes, 7457.
But I can't see anything, so I brought this with me, and if you need it, you're welcome to it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we take 95,000, and we would divide that by, what was the square footage?
43,560,
But the square footage of the tract.
7457.
So we could figure a square foot price by dividing 95,000 by 7457, right?
Yes.
Okay, and I won't bore you with that math. But then in order to convert that to acres, we'd take 7457 and divide that by 43,560. Yep. Is that right?
Yes.
And then we divide that into 95,000 and that'd give us a per acre. Is that correct?
I believe so.
So I get 0.1712 acres. Does that sound about right? You trade in these small lots all the time. It's 74,057.1712 acres. Does that sound about right?
So do you have a calculator?
I do.
Let me borrow
right here.
that.
My child calls,
Thank you.
don't answer.
Oh. Yep. So it's 0.17 of an acre.
Okay, and so then we divide 0.17 into 95,000?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that give us?
That's not right. Well, it's 1274 a square foot.
1274 a foot, and what about an acre? It was 0.17 acres, you said.
Yeah, 558,000. Is that what?
I think that's probably about right. 558,000 an acre. Okay, let's take a break. How about?
We're off the record. It's 12:35 p.m. This concludes recording 1.